was good. How did it sound, Robert?
It's good.
That episode? Marcel?
Sorry, was that a question to Marcel? You should use Marcel's name, not Ez and Rob.
What?
Fucking stop.
I mean, you are absolutely on fire today, Chapman.
Welcome to Cloud Realities, an original podcast from Capgemini, and this week, a conversation show setting up a mini-series that we are doing, looking at the current state of AI. I'm Dave Chapman.
I'm Esmee van der Giesen.
And I'm Rob Kernahan.
And joining us for today's conversation and for the rest of the mini-series on the state of AI, we have Craig Suckling, who's going to join the production team, bring in some of his ex-colleagues and friends across the industry for us to talk to. Craig is a colleague of ours here at Capgemini. Craig, how are you doing?
Doing really well today, thanks, Dave. And it's great to be part of this conversation.
Good to see you. Why don't you just tell everybody a little bit about your day job?
Sure thing. So my role is leading AI across Europe in Capgemini, and I get to work with many different clients, many different organizations, figuring out the complex, exciting, and dynamic world of AI.
Fab. Good to see you.
So, and I add confusing to that list as well.
Confusing?
Confusion's a good ad.
Dynamics. They had a few others in there. I'm just going to add confusion in if that's all right, because I think lots of people are confused as well.
That is normally what you bring to the table, Rob.
Isn't it? It is.
But not on today's episode, because we are doing what we refer to as an Access All Areas or AAA episode today. What's a AAA episode?
It is all access area. So it means that you get a look behind the scene. And it's mostly about digesting, unraveling what we think about these topics. And I think an AI mini-series has a lot to unravel. So I'm very pleased with that. But that's what we do in AAA. And everything can be said, but I think that's what we do in every show, don't we?
A little bit. These things are a little looser, a little less structured, and you get to see some of our thought processes that are going to go into some of the state of AI shows which are to come over season 5. So to that end, what I thought we'd do today in terms of framing a little bit of our conversation and using some sort of external input to that, I actually did some research.
I mean, that is quite surprising, Dave.
I mean, look.
I felt like we needed a bit of a drum roll for that.
Yeah. I think one of those little applause sounds after I said it.
Like,
Define research.
Yeah, there you go.
Thank you, Marcel. Yes. So I had a look around and I was trying to find a sort of a document from a research organization or thinking organization that kind of, like I said, would provoke some conversation today and I managed to find one that I think pokes at a few different useful points about where we are. So let me shout that out. It's Gartner's top strategic predictions for 2025 and beyond, and it's called Riding the AI Whirlwind. You can find this online. It was actually published towards the end of 2024, and it's a decent read. It basically covers a series of recommendations and planning assumptions. So I haven't shared this with the team, so we're going to go through this and we'll have this conversation relatively live against what we're doing. And at the end, we'll return to Sam Altman's 3 key concerns about AI that he's talked about in 2025, and that's going to be something that we consistently ask each of the guests in the State of AI mini-series. So we'll give our thoughts on what that looks like in today's conversation. Sound good?
Yes, let's go.
Sounds great.
So, I always like a surprise. So let's see what happens.
Let's go. Let's get into it then. So first of all, let's just talk a little bit about some of the key finds. So the key findings, starting at the end, if you like, are that the AI whirlwind challenges our privacy and personas.
100%.
And personas being AI representations of human beings that might be used by business to simulate an employee's likeness, knowledge, and behavior to extend the value derived from them. That's number 1.
Yep.
Number 2, that operational risks are at the heart of the AI whirlwind. And number 3, that the AI whirlwind threatens traditional management structures, using AI to automate decision-making, leading to a flattening. So the recommendations, before we go on to our thoughts on them, are that you revise worker employment contracts to account for the rights to use their AI avatars in order to reduce legal risks associated with the ownership of names, images, and likenesses. The second one, to identify the secondary effects of AI operation, for example, energy. And thirdly, to embrace AI's roles influencing critical management decisions, as well as the redesign of organizational structures. And I know you've got plenty of thoughts on that one, Rob. So let's just unpick this a little bit. So first of all, challenges our privacy and personas. So I think privacy for me has been something we've talked about before, but this notion of persona is interesting, isn't it?
So it brought to mind two things, which I think are going to become a reality as we all start to embrace co-pilots and, like, you know, whether we call them avatars or agents that are helping us in our work. The one is these AIs are going to perform activities on our behalf, but they're also going to create data on our behalf. And what does that mean for our personal information? If it's an agent that's acting and creating information on our behalf, is that also our data? Or is that an extension? And then when you think about the privacy of our information, how does that change how we consider that in the organization? So I think that's an area that starts to become very gray if we think about this as an extension of ourselves. And the second thing is reward. If we have agents actually driving value in the organization for us on our behalf again, and sometimes that could be when we're asleep or over the weekend, do we still get compensated for the value that that's creating as an extension of ourselves? So I think those are two interesting dimensions. I have no answers as to how that plays out, but I think they're interesting
I
topics.
hadn't even thought of, and I like the connection you brought there between like an agentic infrastructure and the agent being an extension of yourself. I must admit, when I first read it, my first reaction to it was, what? They're going to try and kind of create a series of digital clones of me, but then I've signed away my likeness and knowledge, and value is going to be driven outside of me as an employee to the organization. I hadn't thought of it quite in the way that you put it, which is I actually might deploy an arsenal of agents in my own likeness or from my own perspective that basically helps me become more productive.
Right.
Well, so you could, I mean, you could take it a step further and say, oh, there's the scenario where you might give an agent information. They then go and talk to an organization that you're morally or ethically not aligned with, and then they pass information about you to that agency because they're trying to execute a task you've handed them. How do you control that? There's that point about the agent accidentally gives data to an organization you don't want to. But the second one is, if I get a Digital Dave and I use Digital Dave and Digital Dave says something, who has the rights to the thing that Digital Dave told me? And there's this whole...
Cloud Realities Productions, Robert, that's who's got rights to that.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. So if I use a Digital Dave and they do something, who owns the output? And then the second, and then the obviously the other one, which is with the agent does something unwittingly that you didn't want it to do. I think it is a privacy nightmare.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. You're right.
It is.
But it's also quite simplified. Like we've got, highly caffeinated Dave. We've got Monday morning Dave.
Oh, it's
We've
not
got
pleasant.
Sunday evening Dave.
Jet lag Dave is one of the worst.
Well, no, I think it's the same with personas. It's the same with personas now in the marketing landscape, right? We've crossed that bridge. We don't really believe in personas anymore. At least that's what you hear a lot, because it's quite binary, or it's this is it and this is your persona. So, and you also have so many different parts. You are dads, but you're also a husband, and I'm a wife. So, what part of you are you gonna let the agent be? What tone of voice? What? So fascinating.
What occurred to you as with your interest in human-centered transformation, and organizations? What occurred to you in terms of the human-agent interface in that conversation? What was your first reaction to it?
Well, the confusing part is, how can it be authentic? I think that's still the case also with chats or every interaction that you have. And it's also the same discussions that we've had about consciousness. To what level, if you talk to an agent version of me, can it actually bring all of me in that? And do I want it to do that? So where's the line in that? Where can you...
It's tricky, especially if Robert's fascination with implants, comes to pass. Then Like if an agent is speaking to, if you've got some sort of chip, right, and one or a number of your agents is having a conversation with somebody else, are you getting that data directly beamed into the chip? Is that what you think, Robert?
So that's not quite how I see the human brain interface, I suppose. But you've got this, I suppose you talk about orchestration of your agents. Do you send them out autonomously, or do you get them to check and balance their activities and actions, which maybe could be some interface like that? But it was more to do with technology enabling us to be better individuals, as opposed to that then creating some bot network out there. Although you could potentially create that type of control interface. The whole point, I think, is we use a keyboard to communicate with a computer. We might use our voice. The English language is a very clunky interface. If we can bypass that interface and suddenly improve the performance, then we could probably get so much more done. So there is a using the humble mouse is not a great way to tell a computer to do something.
Well, so let's use that. Let's use that as a bridge into things like operational risks being at the heart of the AI whirlwind, and understanding, and I guess at least being aware of, if not managing, secondary effects of AI operation like energy sources. So operationally, Craig, what are you seeing as that disruption? Is it simply what Rob was saying there, which is it's going to create radical efficiencies? Is it more than that? And what risks sit at the heart of it, do you think?
Well, I think, and it kind of picks up on what Esmee was saying as well, is that, efficiency is definitely one side of it, but I was just wondering, like, how much do we start to sacrifice creativity? Because it's like, yeah, look, great that we don't have to use a mouse. I look forward to that day. But some of the most messy, inefficient conversations are where the best ideas are born as well. And so, like, how do we balance that still at the same time? And I think that that's something we have to figure out as well as we start to become a lot more augmented by AI.
So I think within that sphere and within the operational risk sphere, some of the stuff that I can see, and if you just take one area of operations, and of course there are millions of areas of operations that this kind of thinking could be applied to, but if you look at a supply chain, and a supply chain effectively becoming agenticized to a high level of percent, what are the operational risks that introduces, do we think? Clearly, it will introduce potentially faster responses, more efficient operation, etc. But there must be a lot of risk involved in that level of automation, particularly in the early years.
So I was having this conversation earlier this week. I'll give you guys two thoughts on this. The one is, and supply chain's a nice area maybe to focus in on. If you have an agent that's helping to automate how you procure and onboard new vendors and purchase new goods that you're using to manufacture, what threshold do you need to establish? Because it's great that it's doing it faster, but do you really want the agent? It's fine maybe if it's buying something for £10,000, but do you really want it going away and executing £1 million worth of procurement for you? Right? And like, to what level do you trust that kind of like threshold of risk for it to take? And then the second thing is like, the threat of ruthlessly optimizing for singular objectives as well. Like if you're saying like, oh, Mr. or Mrs. AI agent on my behalf, go away and maximize the level of cost efficiency that I need to drive in terms of procuring goods through my supply chain, will it do that at all costs in terms of unethically sourcing with the worst carbon footprint from a vendor because it's the cheapest? Those are simple examples, but you can see how those extrapolate out.
Well, it's when you ask a human to do that, you assume there is a basis that they will operate to, moral, ethical, understand your viewpoint, sort of put that in. If you coldly configure an agent...
Just building on that, Rob, sorry to interrupt your flow, but literally in most corporate organizations, not only is that true, but actually it is a terms and conditions level issue where we have to do training on ethical behavior, we have to do training on anti-bribery, all of those sorts of things, which is corporate social responsibility, isn't it?
And we assume the human intelligently applies wider understanding of how the world works so that when they go do something, it's sensible. So we give them autonomy and empowerment. And there is this bit about you ask an agent to go do something, to your point, Craig, How do you codify all those guardrails in effectively so that you know when it undertakes an action with a sizable potential risk or value attached to it, that it is actually going to do it in a way that we want it to? And you can just see it. Somebody will do something, it'll work 10 times, they'll unleash it, and it will go and do something awkward and unexpected. And so that AI blooper thing that I know we've spoken about before, they have happened and they will continue to happen as we learn. But that's quite a big, if you think about the human mind and what it contains by the time we get to work for a corporate, it's got a lot of back story in there about how society operates to allow us to integrate and deliver what we need to deliver.
But it's from the other side as well. What if your AI or your persona is flawless and it actually ingrains the values
Marcel,
of your... Yeah. He's the closest to perfect.
I mean, if there was a dictionary definition of a flawless human, it would say our producer with accurate precision.
Yes, indeed. But what if your digital persona was like Marcel, so flawless, and you meet me in person or a company in person, like customer service in person,
and you're just a crushing disappointment?
Yeah. Then your digital version is way better and flawless and perfect. And then you meet human and it's like, oh, damn, you really are. Yes.
I love the idea of your digital twin is actually more appealing to other humans than you as the human yourself.
In your creation of it, you've just done the entirely idealized version of yourself, which is how you see yourself. And then
Instagram digital twin. Yeah, the perfect
and
version.
you want to marry that person, but definitely not in real life.
Yeah. Well, that's a wholly other podcast right there.
Well, what's the TV show where he clones himself, but they have slightly different personalities? Or he's got a robot that's copied himself and he sends his robot out to meet people. And it's exactly that happens where the robot's more charming and they prefer talking to the robot. And then when he turns up behind the scenes, replace myself with the robot, now we've got somewhere. And they're disappointed and he gets all his conversation wrong and everything else.
My God, so that's going to end up becoming prophetic. That's disappointing. But anyway, let's zoom out and talk about the impact on management structures. So here again, embracing AI's role in influencing critical management decisions, quote unquote, and the redesign of organizational structures. Now, Rob, I know you've got a lot of thoughts on this. This is the motherlode, isn't it?
Oh, this is it. The autonomous organization replace an entire department with a configuration. So you basically define the outcome you need from the organization, and then it goes and configures itself, gets in the right agents to do the class of problem you need to solve, change them together, and then creates a autonomous finance department, autonomous supply chain, autonomous HR, whatever that might be. I play about with the dates. I think something significant will happen next year, as we've discussed on the season 5 launch. It's just what happens after somebody makes the autonomous organization work, the scramble associated with how do you implement that in your own existing org where you've got loads of other problems that you're struggling with, the skills gap, sort of access to capability and such like, and does something else rise and slingshot straight past you because they're able to do it faster than you. So I think there's something very dramatic in the autonomous organization.
So Craig, I think what it feels like to me, building on Rob's point, is over the course of, let's say, even just the last 3 years of generative AI scaling, for want of a better term, and then of course with the introduction halfway through that of agents and agentic infrastructures, it is now reasonably straightforward, I think, to start. Well, actually, maybe I'm overstating that. We're beginning to understand the implications that this might have at organizational structure level. I would say just right at the beginning of that process. But you could get quite ambitious with your thinking in the way that Rob is articulating for us there. What are you seeing on the ground?
Yeah, so good question. I think it's moving fast. I agree with Rob. Like next year, we're going to see some serious breakthroughs in this area. Where a lot of people are at right now is you can think of it as almost like just a first process level of like, let's just start to automate how we do demand forecasting or how we predict risk or how we engage in a contact center. So single process type step. And like where this is getting to really quickly is where you start to go across functions. Like how am I connecting how I'm doing good customer experience with how I'm pricing my products and how I'm creating my marketing. And that's going to be the next level where we start to connect functions. And then Rob's holy grail is like it's the full autonomous organization as well. I think a lot of people are going to get in the way of that. to be honest, because I think culture and like that's going to be a big barrier, because it's going to suddenly obviously be very strange. It's going to require a lot of trust and a lot of letting go to let this happen, and a lot of shifting to just pulling strategic levers across the organization and letting the agents run. So there's going to be these friction points that we're going to encounter, and one of those is going to be culture. The other is actually exposing so much of the inefficiencies in our organizations, where today those are actually quite useful inefficiencies, right? There's a lot of politics, there's a lot of silos. Those things help different people to be successful across an organization.
Mistakes get made, people send emails to the wrong people, all sorts of stuff.
All sorts of
happens
stuff, right?
in orgs, which, yeah, and I mean, imagine, I mean, especially if it was a significant email, I mean, that would be devastating.
Agents would never make such a foolhardy mistake.
They would never make such a mistake, would they, David?
Never. Even if it was a David clone, right?
Digital Dave would not make that mistake.
He would not have done that, Craig. He would not have done that. It is an exact example of Esmee's crushing disappointment of reality.
One of my analogies that I sometimes come to on this is like, if you look at autonomous driving and how that's playing out, it's like, I think we're all comfortable now in like, letting go of the wheels if we're just in automatic cruise control on a highway. And like, if you grab a Waymo in a nicely, neatly gridded streets in the US, it'll take you around in a nice, predictable way. We're not ready to have an automatic car drive through the streets of Naples, right, or somewhere in Italy, because it's just absolute chaos and unpredictable. And it's the same with, like, if you think about our organizations, how comfortable are we right now to let go of the wheel? And where does that kind of like sit with us? The predictable, structured places, great. The messy center of Rome of our organization, a little harder to let go of the wheel on that one.
Not so much. I think when you think of the sort of organizational changes and the impacts of it, and Craig already just touched on this, particularly things like culture, what occurs to you both in terms of how much will it get in the way and how much will it potentially extend the adoption lag piece that we've talked about previously?
I think it really depends on the level of gravity within that culture. So if you already have like the agile mindset that is predominantly there in the organization, they are curious, innovative, explorative in what they do. And I think if you have that, if the biggest part of the organization has that, and that's your center of gravity, they can actually drive it further, I think. But if your center of gravity is still in control, and it also is very closely connected to your reason of existence of a company. Like if you, for example, work in accounting, the mindset of an accountant is not so explorative, to be honest. It's preventing risk. So that, I think, is holding you back when it comes to really opening up all kinds of possibilities, and agents run the entire system.
All right, so we've talked over the recommendations. Now let's look at, in those three sections again, what Gartner set out as the strategic planning assumptions. So I'll give you some data points now, and let's see what we make of them. So back to privacy and personas. A couple of data points. By 2027, so that's 18 months' time, 70% of new contracts for employees will include licensing and fair usage clauses for AI representations of their personas. So 18 months out from now. 2028, technological immersion will impact populations with digital addiction and social isolation, prompting 70% of organizations to implement anti-digital policies. That's 24 months from now. No, a bit longer, 36 months from now. By 2027, 70% of healthcare providers will include emotional AI-related terms and conditions in technology contracts or risk billions in financial harm. And by 2028, 40% of large enterprises will deploy AI to manipulate and measure employee mood and behaviors, all in the name of profit. So who would like to go on that? Let's start at the beginning and just talk about this notion of persona and that being a T's and C's. Craig, how did that land on you?
Yeah, so I think it's going to be spiky. I think that we will see some of the more AI native, the fast-moving digital native companies probably move faster on that. it's going to be, I think there's going to be slower segments of industry that are a little bit slower to move. I would love to see what those T's and C's say as well. It's going to be, I think it's going to be very hard to be specific.
Isn't it reminiscent of the actors' strike recently in Hollywood? And I think the writers did a similar thing where they went on strike because of exactly that, like their persona being replicated either before or after their death on an ongoing basis, and them losing the rights to that. It's almost like an individual version of that, isn't it?
It is, and like you know, like when you work for an organization, often in the clause of a contract is any IP you generate in that organization stays with the organization.
Yeah.
Will there be a T&C around, your agents that represent you, and the IP they create is not your IP? I mean, is that an example of a T&C? I'd love to think about that. Yeah.
I suppose it gets complicated because you think about the creative one. If AI gets really good, I'll just create an actor from scratch that's compelling and likable to the audiences and everything else. But when you get into the workplace, what happens if it's a fusion of 3 personas into one for a highly effective result? You got this merger of capability. So, I suppose the corporates are going to go, it's just all ours and we can decide what we want to do with it.
I mean, it feels to me that I think both the time frame and the number of 70% of new contracts feels a bit too short and a bit too high to me, that one. So I think that's quite aggressive. I'd be surprised if that happens in such a short time frame.
From a geopolitical perspective, globally, you're likely to find that's the sort of thing that will force legislation to say it's illegal or it's legal. Yeah,
I think that's right.
It's not going to be a corporate by corporate. It's going to be a country by country thing. So you can imagine some saying, sorry, civilian rights, they always own their own identity and persona versus other countries that may say.
Like the Personal Data Protection Act, right? Personal Persona Protection Act, I think is quite a likely.
I see what you did there, Dave. Very good.
Mate, I should be.
You're on fire. That incredible amount of caffeine you've consumed today has really put you on the edge.
It's put me on the front foot. My palms are sweating.
But yeah, it's you'll see some that will just say no, can't do it, because it'll have to be at that level. If you get into the state, did you once work for XYZ? Then it's implicit you signed this, and then they sell your rights on, and all sorts of stuff. You get into a horrible social mess, wouldn't you?
Doesn't sound great.
Like the writer's strike, I wonder if like unions across all workforces will really slow that down.
Yeah, and from an adoption side, I know people, I'm not going to mention any names or organizations, that still have trouble using their webcam or use your digital photo in Teams so that you can actually see, that's how the person looks. But there are some people that just resent using their picture. So that's going to be a huge leap to actually, give away your digital rights. That's
agreed.
Never going to happen.
Agreed. Now, the next one, very briefly, I'll come to you with, which is the one about by 2028, technological immersion will impact populations with digital addiction and social isolation, prompting 70% of organizations to implement anti-digital policies. Now, the first part, I think, my take is I think we're already there, aren't we? I'm not so sure about the second part. What was your reaction to that?
It's opening up a lot of possibilities to do Tai Chi during work time.
Can only welcome that. Can only welcome that. Speaking now as being somebody who is, well versed in the art of Tai Chi.
Yeah. No, I do see that happen, to be honest, because maybe we need that it's the same what we discussed with Jitske Kramer as well in the last season. Maybe we should create space to go offline and to really create space to connect and to be creative. And maybe that needs to be forced because everything is digital already. And if we do that, like very consciously as an organization, you create that space. And I also believe that, then you can unite energy all together. But you do have to facilitate that and scope it and frame it. But I can see this happening. Yeah. Especially from an HR perspective.
Not in my world when we're all connected to the net and you can't escape.
No.
Rob has gone the other way. He's going to be online all the time.
Never offline.
Multiple personas banging away.
No.
It's the Matrix.
The Matrix.
I was just wondering about that because for me, like when I'm really struggling to get an idea at work, I'll go take a walk. And like when you're alone and like relaxing, some of the best ideas and clarity come to you. But that's data. Coming to like Rob's point, you reckon if we're connected, that would be a really rich source of data for AI. It's like all that creative, unstructured data. that AI doesn't have access to. And so will that be a really rich input now?
Yeah, but it's not consciousness. That's something different. And I think that's also what Dave has been saying in the past episodes. How is it really consciousness? Because that's something coming from a space where AI is not going to connect to.
So does the consciousness matter though? So take the Turing test. If I believe it's a human, it doesn't matter if it's conscious or not. The outcome is I believe it's a human. Therefore, I'm only interested in the outcome. I don't care about whether it was conscious or not that created it.
For me, it matters, Rob, with
on the human level.
Whether on the human level, sure. But where I was going with is this distinction between AI as a tool and AI as a functioning member of society. And to me, the difference between it being a tool and it being like, kind of at human level has got to be the spark of consciousness, hasn't it? Because up until that point, it's just a very clever tool.
Well, this is the Anders Inset view of how do you know you're not in a simulation? Is the simulation real?
Right.
If you're experiencing it and you believe it to be true and conscious, that's it, isn't it? Then you perceive consciousness.
Also, I just think the lines are going to start to blur because, you look at just, in Japan, where there's a lot more robots helping in healthcare and old people's homes. That's a tool, but now they're also relying on it for emotional support a lot more as well. And so, it starts to become an emotional
that does get
connection as well.
Incredibly blurred.
Yeah,
the lines around that.
It does.
Let's move on. Let's then talk about some of the data that underpins some of the operational risks that we talked about earlier. So I'll give a couple of examples of this. By 2028, 25% of enterprise breaches will be traced back to AI agent abuse from external and malicious internal actors. And then by 2028, 40% of CIOs will demand guardian agents to be available to autonomously track, oversee, and contain the results of those nefarious AI agent actions. So, Robert, how does that stack up for you? Corporate AI warfare.
It's like an arms race on both sides. So let's take a scenario, right? I implement my contact center and I make it agentic. But on the other side of the fence, I'm a human. I get my agent network, and then they start ringing up the contact center on behalf of me, and it's agent to agent to agent, and then it goes up and up and up and up and up, right? And meanwhile, the poor planet is getting hammered by the amount of energy required to deliver this thing. So for every agent I build, I need other agents to watch it. How do you manage and configure that?
Well, on energy,
and do we just get agents to configure it all again? And it's like, wow, where does this end up? There has to be some cap on it practically, and it's going to be something like energy and capacity in compute that's going to kill it.
Which I'm glad you brought that up because I was going to bring that into the conversation. It says that through 2027, which is 18 months out, Fortune 500 companies will shift $500 billion from energy operating expenditure, e.g., paying your fuel bills, to microgrids to mitigate chronic energy risk and underpin AI demand. So I'm assuming that microgrids, they're talking about those container-sized
SMRs.
Yes, nuclear power stations that sit next to data centers and things like that. Craig, that feels feasible within that time frame. I think that's happening already.
It's definitely happening already. And you look at all the hyperscalers and they're already putting CapEx into modular nuclear reactors right next to their data centers. So we're seeing a decentralization of energy for sure. Alongside that, we're also seeing huge advancements in technologies like battery storage as well. And so we're going to start to see the ability to generate and store data in a more decentralized way happening. And obviously renewable energy is increasing as well. So I think we will definitely start to see, there's a couple of things here as well when we think about AI consumption of energy. The one is AI is becoming increasingly efficient as well, and we're starting to also see AI being able to operate and deploy on devices as well. So we will also start to see less reliance, hopefully, over time on always going back to these big bulky data centers and more micro use of energy. We can already run some machine learning, some AI on our phones, and OpenAI came out with a version of GPT-4 that can run on a powerful laptop. So we're going to start to see AI fragment onto device more. And with that, we'll see energy consumption also fragment as well.
And just to go back to the notion that we started with in this section around cyber and agents in cyber. My take on some of those numbers, which is by 2028, 25% of breaches will be traced back to agent abuse. I think 2028 is both quite far out from now and 25% feels low. And similarly, 40% of CIOs by 2028 wanting Guardian agents. Again, that feels like it will be a higher number in a shorter time frame to me. E.g., I feel that the impact of this in cyber is kind of, if it's not already with us, it's not going to be 2028, is it, Craig?
I fully agree, and I agree with Rob. Like, this is an arms race because there's going to be agents on both sides of this, and it's going to be a constant battle to keep up with advancements. Yep. This is already happening now. We're already seeing this. You look at things like X, or formerly known as Twitter, right? And most of the conversations on there are now claimed to be bots, right? And so
dead internet theory, isn't it?
It's a dead internet. And the other side of this that someone spoke to me about the other day is, this could risk actual model collapse as well, because if a bunch of bots are actually creating data to skew results, let's say around customer sentiment, you could easily hack into an organization that's trying to figure out who are my core customers that I should be, selling and marketing to. And if they churn out a bunch of synthetic data, how do we know that that's synthetic data that completely skews what we see in the market and changes what we're doing? So there's going to be a lot of different attack vectors. Some we won't have even thought of, but a lot of it's happening today.
And did you see that wonderful thing that happened on Twitter where they knew it was bots pushing misinformation out, and they responded to the bot and got it to do an SQL style injection and re-engineered the prompt by sticking something in and got it to reveal the fact of its configuration and the fact it was a bot. And that's a very clever thing to do, but it was that sort of realization that actually there's lots of bots out there and they're configured and they're just hammering it and it's going.
And to one of the conversations we had earlier, the speed at which these transactions are going to happen, it's not going to be human speed, right? It's going to be ultra fast speed. So let's move on to the final section then, management structure, and a couple of data points around this. So through 2026, so next year as we speak, 20% of organizations will use AI to flatten their structure, eliminating middle management positions. And by 2029, 10% of global boards will use AI guidance to challenge executive decisions. Now, I think 2026, 20% to flatten is probably the right time frame. I think maybe a little conservative in terms of the amount of organizations responding to it. And then 2029, 10% of boards, I think that's way too far out and way too lower number. I would be expecting in 2026, 10% of boards using AI to at least support their decision making, wouldn't it, Craig?
Yeah, fully. I think so. Again, to the earlier point, I think the world is jagged and messy, and already today we're seeing middle management levels starting to flatten in certain aspects. If you look at contact centers, agents and in many organizations are handling the first triaging of calls. So that's a flattening. If you look at software engineering, we're seeing this move really quickly where a lot of middle management engineers or product managers are also starting to flatten. And so this is going to happen in different spaces at different time. I think that prediction in terms of the flattening is well within the gift. But I think that the point on the executive boardroom, I think that is going to have a slower uptake. I'm less bullish. I think that there's a lot more emotional conversation, a lot more political dynamics that happen in boardrooms, and I think that's going to create a friction point.
And there's also this problem is if you just insert AI inside your organization and get it to control parts of the org, will it overwhelm the human parts of the organization? Because it will work at a blistering pace because it can. And then what happens to the rest of your organization?
Right.
And it's this. Have we properly worked out what the human AI fusion is and how we need to protect ourselves from just getting overwhelmed by this system just constantly hammering you with requests and stuff and activity and everything else? I think will we be able to cope as an interesting point?
I don't think we are working with a lot of leadership teams and management teams. One of the things they say, this will give us transparency. We will see what the teams are doing and how decisions need to be made. They really do not want transparency most of the time.
Most people want to hide behind the veil of opaqueness.
So I think this interface of sort of culture with kind of highly rule-based agents is actually it's a pretty fascinating subject. But what I think might happen, I maybe bet a decent bottle of red wine a bit faster than 10% by 2029 is some form of Alexa-like device in a boardroom that can be queried. So instead of needing to, kind of have weighty packs, you could maybe query an Alexa-like device that is a ChatGPT front end with agents at the back that's automating things to either ask your organization certain information about itself and maybe even trigger certain actions that would be then released through kind of deep automations across an organization. So it's not that it would necessarily be a conversational part of the board, but I would think as a Sherpa, like a data Sherpa initially, and then maybe executing a few little things initially, I think that's probably implementable now if you had, kind of all the time and money in the world. It wouldn't be a cheap thing to implement for a lot of reasons, but I think you could get there quite quickly, couldn't you?
I fully agree. And I think already today, some of the boards I talk to are using co-pilots to help to inform thinking and to source information really quickly. And there's that layer just beneath the board, which is often an entire army of people that are grabbing data, grabbing stats, preparing packs, creating all of these different scenarios to pour over. That's going to go quick.
Of course, Craig, then the most logical thing to do next is just replace the whole board and get the AI to do it.
All right. I mean, fascinating stuff, it is fair to say. I mean, just in the conversation we've had so far, the impacts of AI and the depths of the impacts of it are startling, aren't they? I mean, I think it's unprecedented, really, the impact that technology may well have, not just in IT running a little bit better or processes running a little bit better or being a little bit more regulated, but right at the heart of decision making at the highest point in organizations and, having a giant cultural effect. I think to that end, Sam Altman earlier this year, 2025, raised three concerns about AI, which we've pulled together into three basic bullet points. So let me just put these out for us, and within the context of what we've just been talking about, how do these land on you? So number one, misuse by malicious actors, which warns that superintelligent AI could be exploited to develop things like bioweapons or disrupt critical infrastructure, imposing immediate and severe risk. The second, loss of control, highlighting the long-term danger of AI systems becoming too powerful to shut down and emphasizing the need for robust alignment efforts to maintain human oversight. And then thirdly, accidental over-reliance, which is concerned about society gradually ceding major decisions to AI, probably in small chunks over time, including emotional dependence and blind trust in systems that we don't fully understand.
The irony of the person driving the arms race warning us of the danger of the arms race.
I'm glad he has.
I'm sorry, but that is just brilliant. Yeah. I just love it. Say, we better watch out for all this stuff, but I'm the one implementing it. Great. Brilliant.
Well, it's a bit like Musk, kind of spearheading, writing the letter to pause development of AI just shortly before he released Exit.
He developed his own AI, yeah.
I'm sure there's no
Not that you're cynical about
connection.
Corporate behavior, but oh my word. Well, I mean, they're all true, right? They're 100% all true. Unintended consequences. We have unleashed the Kraken. It will be implemented and it'll be the classic, we didn't really stop to think, we just ended up doing it. And then we'll go, oh dearie me, that happened. And we'll find that the damage is probably already being done, but we won't realize it until 3 years' time or whatever, like the data point or the internet becomes dead or, we get model collapse because the data sets are no good. And I think it's just that. But once something happens like AI at this level and the human technology interface is redefined, can you actually stop it? What we've got to do is learn to cope with it, really. And we can look at certain things, and we're creating roles like AI ethicists and such like to deal with it. But I mean, we're not going to stop. It's happened.
100%.
That's it. We're going. And we just got to try and do the best we can with the thing that's just happened.
Yeah, the genie is firmly out the bottle. But I don't like to be positive. At least we're aware of these big catastrophic things that could happen, and we have some time to think about how we safeguard against them. Yeah. The second one on AI just starting to really go independent, autonomous, and act without our control. There's this entire thing of how do we align it and how do we solve AI alignment? And that's a real challenge because, even between all of us here, who I'm sure have a lot of similarities in our thinking and ethics, I bet you there are some things we have separate. And everybody has a slightly different take on what it means to have really strong ethics in a particular thing or topic. And so when we say alignment, to who? And will we end up having, and maybe this is the answer to this, is just like humans learn from diverse conversation and listening and hearing to each other and debating, do we need to have a diversity of AI that allows for many different types of alignment to come together and debate? And is that a way to get around that topic? I don't know, but at least we have awareness of these issues.
Feels right though, doesn't it? The idea of the diversity being there, considering it represents a planet with lots of humans who are very diverse. So you sort of think, well, but you could get some megacorp rise and one AI gazumps the lot, and then that would be a shame, wouldn't it? So the whole concept of sovereign AI, as in the AI that represents me and my nation state and my ethics, needs to be protected almost, doesn't it?
Yeah. Ez?
Yeah, I'm thinking about simplification because we were talking about flattening organizations, and the over-alignment got me triggered. Alignment is I think the biggest challenge for a lot of corporates, right? Oh, we need to align on this. We need to align on this, especially with silos. So if you have AI help you, take down the complexity of the organization to a level that you can actually understand what's going on and you can make decisions, then I think it's really going to help leaders, but especially the over-alignment and the complexity, and it's all there. It's like an octopus, right? AI now, intelligence is everywhere. So I think if it can help us bring it down to a level that we can actually understand what's going on, then it can help us be better in alignment and make better decisions. So that's what triggered me with the over-alignment.
Indeed. I think my reaction to these three things, and I think it was similar, I think you said it, Craig, is that we're probably already seeing them to some extent in each of these three categories, and it's how far we allow that to go and how we deal with it. So the misuse by malicious actors to a certain extent ties quite clearly to some of the Gartner data that we talked about earlier. That's underway, people are responding to it, and there is telemetry to tell us that might happen. So how does that, kind of come under control, or will it ever? Do we just need to get used to dealing with it? The one that I find the most likely, and it's also the most kind of human haphazard thing, is accidental over-reliance, which to me feels like that idea of seeding this, not only decision-making, but Craig, to your point earlier in the conversation, sort of transactions and, businesses transacting with other businesses at higher levels with greater stakes attached to it. That to me seems like the one that could quite straightforwardly happen. And, we might even see happening as early as 2026.
Dave, on over-reliance, we're starting to see some of that creep in now already. Because if you think about some of the surveys and research we're seeing coming out of educational institutes, more learners are increasingly reliant on AI and are losing their ability to have critical thinking skills. And that's a worry, right? And so how do you actually guard against that? We all have to stay mind active and fit and not just fall into this trap of AI is going to do all the thinking for me and I'm just going to copy paste it. So we have to keep critical thinking skills up alongside AI.
Wonderful point to end on, because I think that's at the crux of all of this, actually. I was going to make a similar point. It was not as well articulated as yours. I was going to say something along the lines of those of us that are in responsible positions in the implementation of this, we all have an accountability, I think, to think about this ethically and to present these dangers. And to your point, Rob, even Sam Altman, who is driving a lot of the pace around this, being clear that, there are dangers with this that we need to watch out for. Before we close out, quick little round the table. Anything else on anybody's mind that we haven't at least touched on in that sort of fairly wide-reaching conversation.
I suppose the one springing to mind as we went through was we all deploy our agents work together, our agents interact on our behalf. Do we end up killing societal conversation and connectivity because everything's through a digital interface and we create the new generation that is actually you're just in your cocoon and being fed results back? And I suppose that's a bit of a fear that we kill conversation as part of this. And I don't know where it's going to go or what that future might hold, but you can definitely see a situation where on the over-reliance point that actually social connection starts to
that's not only was what Esmee was guarding against in the first episode of the season, right, Es?
Absolutely. It was that thing about how do we protect what we have as a society? We don't want to lose the human touch.
So you actually do not want to have a chip in the brain. That's like contra what you said
It's a win,
before.
Ez. It's a win. You've talked him round.
You talked me round to actually, I won't take the chip interface yet. Although if you're the only one with the interface, you win. Once everybody has an interface, it's probably a dystopian future. So.
On that note, Craig, so we're going to, in the next... between now and Christmas in this season, we're going to have a series of episodes that are going to be kind of released looking at the state of AI with some of our colleagues across industry. So do you just want to set that up as a wee bit of a teaser?
Yeah, sure thing, David. And so super excited about this mini-series. We've got a great selection of leaders from across different industry, great friends and colleagues who are, at the frontier of how they're thinking about AI in their respective organizations and roles. And we're going to have some great conversation. We're going to talk about the realities of what it looks like now and the multifaceted aspects of AI from not just the technical side, but also the cultural and the literacy and the organizational side and how to lead from the front on AI. And we're also going to jump into the future, like we've been doing in some of this conversation around what does this look like for these organizations as they start to really drive this forward. And as we all start to embrace this future coming next.
Thank you, Craig. So you'll find those episodes released in a dispersed fashion between now and Christmas. So please join us for those. Good to see you today, Craig.
If you'd like to discuss any of the issues on this week's show and how they might impact you and your business, please get in touch with us at cloudrealities@capgemini.com. We're all on LinkedIn and on Substack. We'd love to hear from you, so feel free to connect in DM if you have any questions for the show to tackle. And of course, please rate and subscribe to our podcast. It really helps us improve the show. A huge thanks to Greg for joining us. Our sound and editing wizards Ben and Louie. Our producer Marcel, Mr. Perfect. And of course to all our listeners. See you in another reality next week.